yellow, you should get the yellow starter deck. All right, jokes aside, guys, it's Espira here, and we're actually going to be talking some Battle Spirits Saga. The cards have been going through the reveals. They're going actually through the main set reveals now. We've had the full starter deck reveals for a couple weeks now, a week and a bit. So I've had a chance to go over and look through the cards and kind of get my general idea of what to do in regards to picking what starter decks I'm going to jump into for the format. That said, there is something to say about the fact that there aren't going to be like starter deck formats. A lot of Bandai games for a while now, since Digimon, basically, every time they release, there's kind of this period before the main set release where we're only playing with starter decks. But out of the gate, no, we're going to be getting a main set with this. So if anything, it's more so going to be either as a pickup to start learning the game or to use some cards that are exclusive to the starter decks and supplement your strategies with main deck cards. So with that in mind, let's just jump right into it. When it comes to Battle Spirits, there are 4 starter decks that are coming out. Dragon Onslaught, Aegis of Machines, Call of the Curse, and Forbidden Magic, all of which are actually pretty archetypal. No matter what kind of player you are going to have a playstyle that resonates with one of the starter decks, which really makes it good. And the fact that there are 4 of them is really great. Red is the mid-range option, gives you a little bit of aggression, a little bit of control in terms of removal. Confront is a big theme, which Confront forces your opponent to have to block into your creature, so it's like pseudo removal on that front, and has a heavy Star Dragon theme. There's a couple of other cards from different archetypes in there, but Star Dragon is really like the primary one, and to be honest, is going to be one of the big reasons you're going to want to pick up that deck. Alternatively, you've got white, which is stall, defense, stall, block. And actually, I really like what they've done with this archetype in Battle Spirits, because other card games, these style of decks kind of have an issue in terms of being able to close out game, which I think Battle Spirits might actually be solving here with this iteration of a stall deck. So we'll be looking into that when we actually look at the decks. Purple is your control, board removal, board control, creatures with like death touch, that kind of thing. And then Forbidden Magic is your aggro deck, super aggro. Stupid aggro. There's a couple of touches of like mid-range cards, but realistically, it's all about the aggro, which tends to do really well when we're talking about new formats or limited card pool formats. With that said, obviously, which one should you pick up? Naturally, I think the go-to is, hey, if you have a favorite color or a favorite archetype that you really want to get into, then you probably should just pick up that archetype of that color. You know, if you're a mech guy, you should probably pick up white, because white just happens to have the mechanical machines, the machine beasts, the mechs, all that. If you're into dragons, you're probably going to find the most dragons in red. If you're into the undead, the necromancy, all that kind of stuff, then you should probably pick up purple. If you're into magical beasts, penguins, all that kind of stuff, then you should probably lean on yellow, right? So if you're really aching for a specific archetype, I think the easy decision there is just pick up the deck that you see yourself playing from that aspect. But if you're looking at, you know, me and my buddy just want to pick up a couple of starter decks and we just kind of want to know what they're about. I want to know which ones are going to do best, or I want to know, you know, hey, depending on what I want to do, what should I look to pick up? So that's what we're going to look more. We're going to go step by step, look at all the different decks, kind of what they offer, and then I'll give you guys kind of like a summarized. These are kind of how I would rank things based on what you're looking for at the end. First, we'll be jumping into red, and actually a huge shout out to Cosmic Plays. He also makes content on Battle Spirits and is pretty active on the Facebook too for putting together these layouts, because Lord knows I still would have made them, but I am super appreciative that they were made just for everybody. If you want to go check them out for even more Battle Spirits, then just go check them out. All the socials for them are up there. So first we're looking into red, and like I said, heavy Star Dragon theme, heavy leaning into the mid-range. And if you're going to play Star Dragons, you really should be picking up this deck. In terms of what it's able to do, because it can do a little bit of everything, it's kind of the one that leans itself best in terms of mitigating a kind of format triangle if you're going to be playing only starter decks. Alternatively, it is definitely the one you want to pick up for some solid staples. So when you're looking at the Star Dragon package, obviously you're going to want to pick up the starter deck to kind of fill out the different pieces. But one of the big pieces you're really looking for in the starter deck is Galaxy Dragon. It allows you to search for more dragons on swing. It counts as an extra red. So there's a lot of, like, this deck really kind of brings together the consistency of what you're looking to do in Star Dragons. Alternatively, there's the 1-drop Star Dragon, which 1-drops are huge when it comes to Battle Spirits, just because they're really what accelerates your kind of like early plays. Obviously, for every one that you have on board, it makes the rest of your plays cheaper. So very important to be able to kind of keep that in mind. There's like another one or two one drops in red, but they don't fit specifically into the Star Dragon archetype. So if that's what you want to do, you really want to do it. I haven't highlighted it, but Sigworm is obviously something you're going to want to look into if you're looking to play Sigworm in your regular constructed deck, because you're able to ascend into it. So that's something to keep in mind. I'd say one of the biggest cards, definitely charged draw. So not only is it pay to draw two, which there is another card that will allow you to draw two. I do believe that's a burst in the main set, but because this one is main flash and it also has a battle trick tacked onto it, I think it has more utility in terms of allowing you to have that flex, right? Usually you're going to want to draw two, but being able to have the option of a battle trick on top of that is super, super powerful. So in general, I think this deck is really solid if you're looking to just play red. And like, even if you're not going to be Star Dragon, because obviously we have the Saurus theme, which is way more prominent in the main set than it is in the starter deck here, but you get a couple of cards here like Blade Dino and stuff like that. This is definitely where the Star Dragons live, with the extra support in the main set, whereas you want to extend anything in red, you're probably going to want a couple of cards here. Landmine, I'm not too sure how much play it's going to see, but the landmine check is kind of where a lot of conversation has been going around to like, hey, this 3K and under is really where a lot of removal is focused around. So if you can pass the landmine check, so it's more so keep that kind of style of card in mind when you're building your decks, establishing plays and whatever. But I don't know how much that specific card is really going to see play in terms of proper constructed play. Moving on to white, and this is one of the colors that I'm really excited about because it really feels like Bandai is kind of honed in on what a stall deck wants to do, but also while not forgetting the fact that they need to win the game. Digimon is the example that comes to mind, in that black in the early sets, it stalled fine, but it had a lot of trouble closing out the game, because it's just everything that was oriented around blocking and everything never really allowed itself to build tempo or kind of push towards kind of closing out the game. They could stall, but the advantage just was never there. Whereas this is where I think cards like the Divine Moonsky Beast, yada, 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 really long name Machine Beast, is really good in terms of, hey, it allows you to block. It makes your blocks all the better. And additionally, if you successfully go a full turn without taking damage, you're going to put some damage on your opponent, which is a big deal. White also has this kind of fusion archetype in which it'll defend as well as kind of pseudo ramp. So this is what a lot of these cards kind of put themselves, which makes sense. Big chunky bodies that allow them to block really well. In the vein of being stally, Greg Armor I think is a great pickup. Obviously, it depends on how good red is. So it has armor red-white, which means it can't be the target of red or white spells. It all depends on how much red there is, but typically, you know, dragons, yada, 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 you're probably going to expect that a good number of people are going to pick up the red dragon deck. In terms of the longer terms of the meta, armor is just as good as kind of whatever color is seeing the most representation, but nevertheless, it's a good blocker, got some good armor. I think in the earlier stages of defining the metagame, having a card that isn't the worst blocker, but additionally just kind of nullifies a lot of what your opponent is trying to do in terms of dealing with it is also really nice. And then there's the one drop. One drops are just really good to highlight because, like I said, you need them in almost every single kind of deck. They allow you to accelerate. And then there are just some that line themselves up to being more synergistic. When it comes to the Mecha Wing Duck, that represents itself in every time a card bounces back to your opponent's hand, you're able to basically ramp one, which is absolutely massive. And then you just have more auxiliary cards like Buffalong Bill, which allows you to be more defensive, proc your defensive abilities whenever you're attacking, which is what these stall decks do need, right? Like once you've actually stabilized, prevented your opponent from doing something, you need to be able to be proactive in some way. And I think that's the folly in a lot of defensive stall decks in other games. And I think where this starter deck is going to line itself up to be really annoying and really good. It's a bit slower, which means you might not be able to get there. But if you're someone who likes stall, this is probably one of the better ways I've seen card games implement them, at least early on in a game's life cycle. Moving on to purple is where we have control, and specifically core control. So a lot of cards here are going to be dedicated to removing a lot of cores off of your opponent's cards or removing the last one. That's true here for the Dark King Snake, where on play, removes all of them but one, and then when attacking, you're able to proc off the one. Additionally, there's a big soul core theme here. So there's a lot of different things in purple. Two here specifically, but a lot more in the main set that deal with utilizing soul cores. So it'll probably be better going into the constructed format, deciding a couple that you want to specifically focus into. But, Dragon Naga is pretty good because it allows you to draw a card. Otherwise, you have Curse, which is effectively Death Touch. But purple is just kind of weird because I would say as an out-of-the-box experience, I don't think it's the best. I think it's incredibly slow. and doesn't necessarily have the catch-up cards that a control deck typically needs to be able to kind of make it all the way there. The Dark King is fine and can obviously kind of swing the board state, but it doesn't really feel like it still does enough to really make up for the fact that you're going to be spending your first couple of turns just using removal, or removal that like almost gets there but doesn't totally get there. Nevertheless, there's a couple of staples here. Again, I'm just going to point them out. The 1-drops, if you're looking for an undead 1-drop that's looking for here in the starter deck. There is another one in the main set. But if you want specifically an undead one, you're going to have to get the one here. Additionally, Bloody Rain is super good. It's basically a floodgate where once you trigger the ability, your opponent can only attack if they lose a core off things. So you're going to be getting your opponent off of their levels. You might even be exhausting some of their spirits depending on what they're doing. And what's great is that this is splashable, right? When it comes to Battle Spirits Saga, you're not committed to playing monocolor decks. It's just focusing on one color allows you to make your plays much cheaper. But this is the kind of effect where I could see people wanting to pick up the purple starter deck specifically because they want this card. Cards like these that can be teched into any deck, and depending on the format, like, hey, I know for a fact that my opponent's playing low to the ground aggro, and if I just play this, he's just not going to do anything. So in terms of what the card provides for real big focus, I think that's the big hit card. But naturally, if you want to really lean in onto the curse theme, or you want to lean into a lot of what the soul core stuff and and core removal, then I would say you're really looking to pick up the deck. And again, if you want to play purple, then by all means you probably should pick it up, because what these starter decks do really well is that they spread their archetype across multiple things. So the red isn't just Star Dragons. You also have a little bit of Pterosaur in there. When it comes to the purple here, you have some serpents, you have some undead, you have some core removal, you have curse focus. So it kind of mixes and meshes there. But I will say, out of the box, Call of the Curse feels like the one that's not going to be as impactful if you're looking to just utilize these cards. And finally, moving on to yellow. Yellow is aggro, very low to the ground aggro. And I think out of the box, if you and your friends are jamming just nonstop starter deck games, I think this is the best one. Low to the ground aggro is extremely good in a new game, in a new format, because people are still, when it comes to deciding your control options when you're playing a mid-range or control deck, you just need to know what the meta is to know how to answer it. So not only do you get that early format advantage, but additionally, it's just incredibly consistent and really solid. In terms of things that extend your aggro, your extra rare is incredibly good. This is one of the few ones out of the star decks I feel like really has an impact on what the deck is trying to do. It allows you to get additional swings with your 2-drops. It gives them an anthem buff across the board. An additional one I would say is the Nightcat. It provides you more draw to be able to find more of them. And I will say that when you're talking about 2-drop aggro, there is kind of like too much support. You really do need a certain density of 2-drops to really make it work. So I wouldn't say including a ton of these. Like, as you can see, there's the 3-drop, the 4-drop, and then there's like some Angels Smattering, which like the Angels are fine and may be impactful depending on what the rest of the Angel support is. But in terms of like this deck specifically, they're kind of just there to kind of round out the starter deck. But really in terms of that, you have those two. And then some of your best drops are your 2-drops, where you got the Penguin, where when summoned, he's able to potentially find you another 2-drop, which that's huge because it means you can extend your plays with 2-drops, which is all the more powerful. Or there's the Koala, where if you can utilize them, hold them back, swing with everything, and then you just get draws as your opponent tries to mitigate by blocking. So out of the box, I think by far this is the strongest starter deck because it's the lowest to the ground. It's the most consistent in regards to the thing that it's trying to do. And I think generally will be the most successful of the 4. That comes with the caveat that I think this might be one of the less useful decks in terms of the wider constructed format for yellow outside of 2-drop aggro. There's some more aggro pieces in the main set, which also helps. But this is the one where it's like, you could see some play with the Angels in an Angel-based theme deck. But the cards are so well positioned to supporting this 2-drop aggro archetype that I really think, it's going to do really well at what it does, to a point where this 2-drop aggro might go from starter deck to just being one of the better meta decks going into the first format. But in terms of extending into doing other things, I don't think the archetype is as flexible or extends in as many ways as the other archetypes. So to round it out, I think best out of the box, you have Forbidden Magic. It's the most consistent. It's low to the ground, it's aggro, which means you have less possibilities of your deck just not doing what it's trying to do. Secondarily, I think it's Dragon Onslaught. The red deck is just mid-range, which means you can kind of put yourself in a position, if you can play it out really well, to bait out whatever your opponents are doing. And also, you have a couple of staples in there that really go well with the main deck cards. I think Aegis of Machines after that will be really annoying. Does really well in terms of being able to defend itself, but could be a little slow. And even worse on that slow list, I would say, is Call the Curses. Moving into main set, there is some pivots there. In terms of main set, like, hey, forget the starter deck format because that's not really a format. But if I want to focus on what's really going to allow me to have the most value going into building constructed decks, I think the red one, if you're looking yourself to have Star Dragon, and there's a couple of red staples that apply to all red decks, which are just really good. So I think that's the most value in terms of if you're looking to play a red deck, you're going to want to be able to get this one. After that, I would say it's Aegis the Machines. There's a couple of key cards in here that can really kind of extend your late game or even your early game to a point. I think the Duck is like huge, and I think that could do a lot of play in a lot of white decks. And I think that alone can just justify a lot of what this is doing. From there, Forbidden Magic, because I think it's still going to be one of the meta contenders going really early on. It's going to take a while for people to adjust, and even if they adjust, it might just be powerful enough to be able to actually keep on pushing until the release of a new set. So I do think between it being the best out of the box and then potentially a strong archetype going into the main constructed format, I think there's a good reason for it to keep your eye on it and probably just pick some up because, you know, 2 starter decks, I think, gets you full play sets. And from there, you're kind of just able to have this aggro deck on the side, depending on the shifts, ebb and flows of the meta. And then finally, Call of Curses. I hate to put it forth as in last of both, but like, and I will say some of this has to do with me still being relatively new to the game and not knowing how good its control options may be. But it just felt like the deck that kind of had a little bit of everything, but nothing that I saw felt absolutely mandatory in being able to go into the constructed format, which, you know, we'll see. I do think if you want to play purple, you should still pick it up. And that's true for any of these decks. If you're a red player, pick up the red deck. Same thing with white, yellow, or purple. But I will say, in terms of do I feel it necessary? Looking at what I've seen from the main core set, it really feels like there's a couple of pieces there, but nothing that really is an absolute. It feels like there's a few decent cards that supplement your strategy, but nothing, you know, super specific. With that said, that is just my opinion. And I will say, guys, I'm still relatively new to the game, so I'm doing a lot of theory crafting in regards to how I feel about this, but I could be totally wrong. So if I am totally wrong, let me know down in the comments below and let me know what you guys want to play. Me personally, I'm a huge dragon nerd and I'm a huge mech nerd. So there's a good chance that red and white are just kind of my calling. And the fact that you can build multicolored decks in this game really mean that I'm going to be experimenting a ton, even when it comes to this early. If you guys like the video, thumbs up. Dislike it, thumbs down works too. If you want more Battle Spirits Saga videos, subscribe buttons in the corner. And with that said, I'll catch you guys on the next one.